Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Flexport Capital, helping brands like Nood achieve growth through customized financing. My name is Quentin Purtzer, and I'm a business development lead for our capital team here at Flexport. Flexport Capital provides inventory and logistics financing to importers in North America and Europe. And today I will be chatting with Jon Blair, the founder of Free to Grow CFO, who serves as Nood's Fractional CFO. Jon will be joining me on stage shortly, but first a few housekeeping notes. On your screen, you will see a sidebar to the right of the main stage. If at any time you need technical assistance during the live webinar, please message us in the help chat located on the sidebar. In the menu above your screen, you have two tabs. In the first tab, you can register for Flexport's next webinar, so be sure to check that out. In the second tab, there is a brief feedback survey for this webinar. We love your feedback, so please fill that out before exiting the webinar. You can also ask live questions for the Flexport team via the Q&A tab on the sidebar. Today, in lieu of the live Q&A, we will be answering questions in writing on that sidebar. Throughout the webinar, Jon and I will be posting a handful of poll questions in the chat during our discussion. We will be covering various topics surrounding Nood, lending, and current market conditions that may be applicable to the state of your business. Please feel free to respond. And finally, a brief legal note. Please keep in mind that all content provided in this webinar is informational and may not be customized to your specific business requirements. We recommend reaching out to a Flexport expert to discuss specific dynamics affecting your business. And with that, I'd like to invite our guest Jon onto stage. Jon is the founder of Free to Grow CFO, who serves as Nood's Fractional CFO. Welcome, Jon.
Thanks for having me, Quentin.
Got it. I'd like to kick things off with an introduction to you and your company. Can you share a bit about your background in Free to Grow CFO?
Yeah, so I'm Jon Blair, founder of Free to Grow CFO. A little bit about me. Really, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I've been on the brand side my whole career before starting Free to Grow CFO. Most recently, I was a founding team member, COO, and CFO for a company called Guardian Bikes. You may have seen us featured on ABC Shark Tank. We're a Mark Cuban company, and we're a fast-growing D2C brand, seller of the safest kids' bikes direct to your door. In 2022, I was ready for the next chapter in my career. And after a lot of soul searching, I realized that I really have a heart for the earlier stage of scaling a consumer brand. And additionally, I observed out in the marketplace that growing brands tend to need a CFO before they can afford one full time. And so in 2022, that's when I decided to start Free to Grow CFO. We provide fractional CFOs for growing D2C brands. And our goal is to provide founders of those growing D2C brands with the advice and the expertise and the tools that they need to scale alongside healthy profit, cash flow, and confidence.
That's awesome. And today we're speaking specifically about one of your clients, who's also one of my clients, Nood. Can you tell me a little bit about Nood?
Yeah, Nood is an awesome company, actually located locally out here in Austin, Texas, where I'm located. They're a growing D2C brand that sells an at-home laser hair removal device called the Flasher. That's their flagship product. Laser, the whole value proposition is laser hair removal in the comfort and the privacy of your own home. And which the results are permanent hair reduction in 8 weeks, but at 1/10 of the cost of traditional laser hair removal. And again, you're able to do it in the comfort and the privacy of your own home.
Right. And so Nood was started a few years ago, and they reached out to you to begin, using you to be their fractional CFO. Can you walk me through why they approached you and what you began doing for Nood?
Yeah, so the brand is growing, going through the challenges and the excitement of scaling. And when it comes to scaling a consumer brand, and especially in a D2C context, it's all about cash flow, right? And managing cash flow. And so they already had a fairly solid accounting foundation, but really need to get that forward-looking visibility into more than just profitability, really into cash planning. And so ultimately, I met Sam, the founder, through actually a fellow lender located locally here in the Austin area. And Sam was just really looking for someone who could partner with him to, again, look forward looking and understand the cash flow and profitability impact of certain decisions. And really, one of the biggest tasks at hand at that time was figuring out how to continue to finance the company's cash cycle, which is namely in a D2C context, it's usually driven by inventory, days inventory on hand. And so really the what brought us together and was really, hey, how do we put together the cash flow visibility and the right financing to be able to continue to finance inventory purchases as the brand continues to scale?
Got it. And so specifically, you were able to build out financial statements for Nude. You were able to build out an accurate forecast, and then you were able to work with Sam on, how he can most accurately forecast and plan for his, increasing demand as Nude was scaling up through, through the year. And so we can talk about the specific financing solution that you found for Nude, but what were some of those successes, and how were you able to add value to Nude immediately with these services you're providing?
Well, I mean, most importantly, again, going back to kind of what brought us together in the first place, it's really two things. One, how to build out visibility into the future, and two, how to build out visibility into cash flow as differentiated from profitability. Most brands tend to have their finger on the pulse of like historical profitability, right? But when it comes to building out visibility into future expected cash flows, right, which really governs investment and scaling decisions, that's something that's a lot harder to find. A capability that's hard to find in early stage, scaling brands. And so, what they were having lots of success with scaling in a D2C context. And the major challenge that was in front of them was keeping enough inventory on hand to be able to continue to scale with confidence. And so one of the first things that we put into place in terms of helping them close that gap was immediately started working on building out a 3-statement financial projection model. When I say 3-statement, I mean projected profit and loss, balance sheet, and cash flow statement. And the model that I like to put together is looking out into the future 24 months in within the context of each of those projected financial statements. And what you're able to do is use those projections to decide things like, hey, can I continue to afford cranking on ad spend in these certain channels? Can I afford to hire this headcount? And more specifically, in tying back to the Flexport Capital, what ultimately led us to seeking a line of credit is, hey, can we afford to build up inventory levels as we continue to scale, keeping in mind that the consumer demand is also seasonal. So there are times of the year when we have to ramp up more than other times of the year. And so as we built out the model, I would say our first kind of quote success was being able to see the 3 financial statements projected in the future, and very clearly being able to see that we needed to bring a inventory financing product into the mix so that the marketing team can continue to successfully and confidently scale.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess the easy question to follow up with that is, what were the challenges that Nood is going to face? And I think that you highlighted a few of them. Is the challenge was Nood was doing everything right. They were scaling, marketing was working, they were looking to hire, but cash was that constraint. So can you talk more to that on when you started to talk to Sam and the rest of the team at Nood? What was the trade-off that they were needing to make, and how could you use debt to better balance that decision?
Yeah, so I would say the simplest way to walk through that is that, so actually the company was very healthy financially. However, it was at the expense of confidence to scale. And when I say that, I mean that marketing was continuously outpacing the inventory replenishment forecast, right? And so what that meant was continuously getting close to feeling like we may stock out of inventory, right? And what's the major concern over and so like what's the byproduct of that? Well, we want to place bigger orders, but do we have the cash to do it, right? And even more so because we're chasing inventory, we're air freighting everything, which air freight is much more expensive than ocean freight, right? Like I mean,
Right.
a magnitude's more expensive than ocean freight, and so uh, we're also taking a hit to the margin, right?
Yep.
And so when it comes back to like, hey, why do we need to bring debt to the table? It's like, okay, well, we need to we need the ability to finance bigger orders to get ahead on inventory and ship them via ocean, which has a longer transit time, right? So that we can ultimately realize lower inbound shipping costs, which leads to improved margins. And then the marketing team, they know they've got, no pun intended, a boatload of inventory in house and on the way, right? And so they feel very confident as they see the ability to scale ad spend in certain channels. They're not sheepish about doing that. They do get concerned when it's like, hey, what if I crank on this ad spend and we stock out and we end up wasting that ad spend. So that's really what it was able to help with. That's really the gap that we were trying to close to ultimately give us more confidence in our charging forward to scale.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so before we move on, I wanted to open a poll question up for the audience. What challenges have you and your team faced over the past year? We're curious your responses as we move on. So, John, as you've discussed that Nood needed some sort of inventory financing to get ahead on their working capital, to increase inventory, and to allow their marketing team to continue to do their thing and move along. You reached out to Flexport Capital, among other lenders. Why did you reach out to Flexport Capital?
Well, I mean, at first because I knew you guys from Guardian Bikes, but more specifically, that's a little tongue in cheek. That is why I knew about you guys, and so I was familiar with the product. But in terms of, here's the thing: when it comes to scaling a brand that's fairly early stage and getting debt financing for inventory specifically that actually meets your needs, is that there are very few types of lenders out there that can actually meet your needs if you're truly growing. Traditional banks don't cut it. We can talk about that some more in a second. But uh, effectively, I knew from my time at Guardian, we never ended up working with Flexport Capital, but we had worked on trying to put a few deals in place. And ultimately, I knew how the structure could really fit well around what's called the cash cycle for Nood, that it really, really was going to overlay well over their inventory financing needs. And so it was a no-brainer to bring it in as an option.
Yeah. And so, John, what you're referring to is the structure of Flexport Capital, in which Flexport Capital will pay suppliers invoices from overseas suppliers directly on behalf of Nood and other clients. And then we can extend that term out 90 days. And so the 90-day buffer that Nood is able to receive from Flexport Capital is able to shorten their cash conversion cycle and really close that gap between when they are receiving revenue for their goods and when they had to pay their expenses for their commercial invoices. Is that right?
Yeah, and specifically too in a D2C context, like if you're selling through retail and you have B2B orders, it not always, but it can be easier to close the gap on your cash cycle because you have a big receivable from that retailer, but you oftentimes will factor that receivable or borrow against that receivable, right, to basically close that cash cycle gap. You can't do that in a D2C context. You don't
Right.
have receivables, right? But you still have the same cash gap where you're stocking big purchase orders that you place with when you place with your suppliers, but you're selling them little by little every single day. And so what the Flexport Capital line helped us do was purchase those big POs that we're going to sell over the course of several months and finance the time between when we have to pay the supplier and when we ultimately collect cash because an order went out the door.
Right. And so during that time, marketers have extra money in their pocket to continue to drive ad spend, continue to drive more demand to Nude. As you know, you're able to hire more headcount. There's quite a bit of flexibility there when you are receiving, recognizing your revenue prior to having to pay those expenses. And so for Nood, Flexport Capital was the right choice. However, you did look at a few other financing options. Can you walk through what other financing options you looked at and maybe why they didn't work out for Nood?
Yeah. So primarily, we looked at three other types of lenders. Kind of traditional or commercial banks, um, SBA loans, and ABLs or asset based lines of credit. And on the traditional commercial bank side of things, I already knew from my experience that that wasn't going to be a fit. But I always go to market and just see if someone might surprise me. Although I did not have high hopes. The bottom line is commercial banks to do like what's called conventional financing, the underwriting required to do conventional financing, they almost always require 3 years of tax returns. So two problems with that: one, when you're early stage, you usually don't have 3 full years of tax returns, and two, um, that tax return is what happened last year. If I'm growing up and to the right, I need to finance where I'm going this year and into next year. I don't need to finance what just happened. And so they use previous year's data that just doesn't result in enough capital. So we couldn't go there. SBA is a great product. I'm a big proponent of SBA, but only if you have no other options. That's what it exists for, and that's why the government backs it. Low cost of capital, but you cannot negotiate the terms at all, really, because it's what you see is what you get. Very cumbersome covenants, personal guarantees, all that kind of stuff. And most of them are term loans. And when you're growing super fast, you're literally going to outgrow that term loan, and you're going to either have to just take it out with a new term loan and go through underwriting all over again, or take it out with a Flexport Capital line or something like that. And so that wasn't going to work. And then on the ABL side, again, ABLs are a great product, but there are advance rate constraints. You tip generally on average, you can only borrow 50 to 65% of the cost of the inventory you're financing. Flexport can advance up to 80% of the cost. And I mean, look, when you're scaling really fast, that squeeze of like 15 to 20% of costs, or even 15 to 30% of costs, makes a huge difference in terms of how much additional capital you have available to us. So that's ultimately where Flexport, from a structure standpoint, that's a big part of where Flexport won out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the advance rate, we do pride ourselves on being able to offer 80% advance rates against inventory. With Flexport, we are a freight forwarding company, so we have data on the back end that really supports our underwriting and diligence process. So we're able to have visibility into the supply chain of these companies that we're working with, including Nood, where we're able to, view where shipments are originating, where they're going to, and then on top of our underwriting process, which we have a full team behind us where we're diving deeper into not only the historical financial statements, but also the projections to ensure that we're correctly sizing these lines and amending when necessary. It's something that we pride ourselves on being flexible and being able to meet our clients' needs. And that was something that Nood was able to do earlier this year too, where you continued to grow and we need to amend quickly. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
The amendment, yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say that's another big advantage of a lender like Flexport Capital is that and this is something that I mentioned to you up front when we started talking about putting a deal together, and it's another reason why commercial banks and SBA loans are like not a great option, is when there's a business that's growing really fast, you need to amend the line regularly, right? If you start hitting your growth goals, what you get underwritten for and approved for is only going to last so long, right? And so one thing that I really explored up front was, hey, what does the amendment process look like? Because we're going to need to amend if we continue to hit growth goals that we have. And I'm fine with starting here, but I need to know that it's easy for us to quickly re-underwrite it and right size the line structure and a credit limit for where the business is heading. And so I think only a few months into the relationship, maybe 6 months at most, it was very clear that we needed to amend to a bigger line size and just restructure a few things within to just make sure it aligned better with the most recent cash cycle and cash needs for Nood. And so I mean, it was as easy as picking up the phone and sending you a text message and you calling me right back and talking through everything. And you asked for a few additional pieces of information, but very light underwriting because wouldn't even call it underwriting. It's very light. But you guys already had the relationship with us. You're already getting our financials and other reports on a monthly basis. So it's really just updating a few quick things. And you guys were able to turn around a term sheet for the amendment, like next day. And I mean, that's just great because that's what a brand like Nood needs as a lender who we can get on the phone immediately, not have to schedule a call next week, and we can just talk through our challenges and the restructuring we need to do, and that can move really, really quickly, which you guys did a great job at.
Yeah, thank you. And we, again, like I said, I keep plugging our underwriting process, but we do pride ourselves on speed to close, the speed to making decisions on our underwriting. And the other thing that we do pride ourselves on is being document light and covenant light as we are lending to companies. So, full disclosure, we do have a lien over Nude's goods. However, our covenants will be very, very light compared to other lenders. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, they are very light, very reasonable, and at the end of the day, I mean, I even tell you that like when we went through the actual like document negotiation, our legal counsel was like had very little to say about the docs, which is not typical. Usually, we're dealing with ABL and definitely commercial banks. I mean, it's like a bloodbath in red lines all over those
Right.
docs, and so at the end of the day, they're fair, and that's what it comes down to is like, and they're fair given the performance of the business, right? And
Right.
that's really what you're looking for. And there are plenty of lenders out there that have covenants that feel overly punitive, and they feel very, it doesn't feel like you're in a partnership. It feels like you're actually kind of like getting like shackled to like a relationship, and you're like, man, I hope I don't lose my company if I trip one of these covenants. And so I felt that they were very fair given the performance of the business, and that it felt like a partnership.
Right. And we're giving you the flexibility to continue to grow, right? There's no negative covenants about raising equity, additional debt. There's nothing there
Totally.
because we don't want to shackle any company that's growing in such a significant way, like Nude is. And so we're very happy to extend these partnerships. And now, I mean, let's talk about the fun spot. You have liquidity, you're growing. What's Nude's goals now that everything is in place?
Well, so what the line of credit allows us to do from a goal standpoint is for us to put aside the concern and the discussion around like, hey, what if we run out of inventory, right? Or what if we order too much and we run out of cash? You can put that stuff aside in large part, and we can really go forward with having discussions about like, where do we want to expand? What markets do we want to expand into? Um, what product expansion do we want to do? Like, how do we want to improve the experience for our customers, right? And so like the point that I'm making is that like, I just got done doing quarterly planning with the leadership team just a couple of weeks ago for Q2, and well, we didn't talk about financing at all because that was taken care of. And so we could talk about what's our marketing strategy, what are our revenue goals, what markets do we want to expand into, how do we want to improve the relationship and the value we provide to our customers through launching additional products, right? And so
Right.
it has a very, very tangible impact on our ability to set goals that are really building the future instead of feeling like we are tied down by capital constraints.
Yep. It lets you focus on operating the business, right? You can focus
Exactly.
on what matters and you don't need to worry about financing. And that's the benefit of being able to, match your working capital in an appropriate way. And so I know starting to run low on time here. So I do want to ask kind of a broader question is you had a forecast coming into 2023 with Nude. And then through the first 4 months of the year, there's been disruptions in the banking sector, significant inflation. And due to this, there's a ton of uncertainty in the macroeconomic environment. Does this change recommendations towards how you're helping Nude or other companies plan for the second half of the year or, the next 12 months?
I mean, it's definitely something that we we maintain an awareness of,
Yep.
and it's something that you should always be aware of environmental factors. But at the end of the day, if you're an entrepreneurial, fast-growing business like Nood is, what we're laser focused on is our customers. What problems are we solving? How do we serve them better? How do we get better at marketing so we can help them understand the problems that we solve? And so, like, we're not retreating by any means because of the macro and economic environment. We
Right.
certainly have to always make sure that we are financially healthy, right? We have to make sure we're profitable. We have profitable cash flow. We use debt, but we use debt in a responsible manner, right? Um, but we're focused on becoming better and better at marketing, and underneath that, becoming better at marketing, serving our customers even better and providing them with more and more value, and deepening our relationship with them every single day. And that's the way, like, when you talk about downturns or like environmental factors, listen,
Yeah.
companies, brands that truly solve problems, right? Truly solve problems and are great at communicating how they solve problems and are continuously trying to deepen the relationship with their customers. They're the ones that withstand the test of time no matter what's happening in the macroeconomic environment. And that's the approach that Nood is taking, and that I always like to take with any company that I work with.
Right. And with that, with the strong fundamentals, you can really weather any of the macroeconomic environments that come in, right? And
Absolutely.
the fundamentals when it comes to D2C are a bit different, right? It's strong marketing, it's profitable growth, it's really paying attention to cash conversion cycles, right? I mean, am I missing anything?
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
that's great. Well, John, we're running low on time here. So based off of, everything you walked me through, if anyone wants to get in touch with you for a consultation or anything like that, how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, they can find us at freetogrowcfo.com, and also give me a follow on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I am under Jonathan Blair, as it shows on the screen, not Jon Blair.
Right. Cool. Well, thanks, John. With that, that'll conclude today's webinar. Thank you for the insightful conversation, and we appreciate you joining us. And thank you to everyone in the audience for attending this webinar. If you'd like to reach out to the Capital team, or you'd like the Flexport Capital team to reach out to you, please feel free to email us at capital@flexport.com. You can also click the button that is on the screen for you there. And a reminder to please fill out our feedback survey before exiting. Thank you. Have a great day.